camera. I'll be sitting in front of the camera.
Mind if I have a seat?
Director of Hololens. Ah, nice to meet you. Thank you.
So Mike Small, actually.
Wow.
And he's a co-admin. So we'll break you guys out today. Most interesting.
Yeah, tell my boss. I want to come to this. Yeah, pretty good. Yes. I'm trying to come. Not a bad thing.
The name of
progression of the school's work. So it's always fun.
No, it's really spectacular. So you continue to saw
Two reasons why I came to JIT. One was basically adults. Really? Second thing was to see the studio. I wanted to do that. Third thing was you guys in the programs. Integrate us with our studios.
That's such a discussion right now.
That's all got jobs. You know their stuff. You know it's cool. More in JIT.
I want to welcome everybody to Design Showcase and our lecture. And I'll read you a short bio first, and then I'll tell you just another item. James Tichenor is a maker, designer, and educator who's been working at the intersection of design and technology for the past 15 years. He is the first graduate from the NJIT School of Architecture to come back and give the showcase lecture. I am pleased to say he was my student when he was here, and after he graduated from here in 1999, he worked in architecture for a few years, and then he went back to school, and he went to MIT to get a master's in design and computation, and then a degree in interaction design from the Institute of Interaction Design at Ivrea in Italy. In New York, returning to New York, he worked as a creative director for the lab at the Rockwell Group, which was a technology and innovation group within the larger Rockwell Group design agency. And at that time, he spun out a number of open source projects for creating interactive spaces and improved Google's interactive spaces and Space Brew CCs. When he was looking to move from specific instances to whole platforms, he moved 3 years ago to Microsoft, and he has been a user interface designer on the Hololens project. And what I find, in addition to the fact that he's one of our graduates and one of my former students, it's interesting that his path actually parallels and almost predates the same path that the College of Architecture and Design has. 10 years ago when we started Design Showcase, it was for the School of Architecture. 8 years ago, we started the School of Art and Design, and we became the College of Architecture and Design as we took the legacy of digital design from architecture and we expanded on it. And it's exactly the same thing that James has done with his career. So it's interesting in that sense, and he has, I know, some extraordinary work to show you, and I am really happy that he is here.
Hello. Hi, how's everybody doing?
Good.
Today I wanted to talk a bit about, I do a lot of work thinking about the intersection between the physical and virtual, and I've been using this rubric recently of thinking about how you think about the physical and digital meet through interface, how they meet through objects, and how they meet through materials. So just to kind of frame that up, you know, for years we kind of thought of this divide between the physical and the digital. But you start to think about what we really think about where we live our lives. And obviously we live a lot of our lives in physical spaces. And I think, you know, in the School of Architecture, this shouldn't be surprising when we try and catalog what physical spaces are. They're things like work, home, third spaces, cars, town centers, airports, and bedrooms. But I think, you know, it's more and more clear to us that now we live so much of our lives in virtual, and we can just as easily think about those as virtual spaces and think the same kind of thinking of creating place to those virtual spaces. And I think that actually that's already true. I think if you think about competing platforms, you think about all these different kinds of services, all these different places, and what makes you live on them and live your online self. And for me, I'm really interested in how these two connect and how they interact. And I originally had it going the other way. I had from interface to object to material, thinking about interface as a very way that we think about interacting with the physical, to objects moving to more sort of Internet of Things, and then material being the most far future, which is sort of reactive surfaces or something more complex like that. But coming here today, I kind of wanted to tell a story kind of in reverse. And this has kind of been my story dealing with these three things, going from doing a lot of work thinking about how the digital might react as a material, then moving to a lot of work about how it's with objects, and then finding myself, in order to work more where things are getting towards people, working more in interface. So, a little bit about me. I'm the senior UX designer at Microsoft Hololens. So this is me wearing a HoloLens with some holograms at our office. It's pretty fun. I'll talk more about that as we go. But this was me 20 years ago here at NJIT. And I also like the other picture because it clearly was the 90s. And I guess I'm at some protest to demand to be able to wear oversized pants. But also, that is me at the School of Architecture. I thought that was, I don't know how I managed to find a picture of me sitting at a desk and same desks. So anyway, that was a while ago. And at that time, I think it was in architecture school I really developed this love of material and really like a passion around materiality. That's something that I think they instilled in you in architecture school for a lot of reasons. And so I was working in architecture doing the kinds of projects you do when you get just out of school in architecture, competitions, which were awesome and fun, and then exhibit design with a small firm, and that allowed more engagement with materials. But I don't know if it was really what I was looking for, and it was also, 2001 was a time when a lot of change happened in our economy, and I kind of was like, is this what I want to do? And I found myself becoming more and more interested in materiality and how I could begin to explore how materials interact. And I didn't really know how to do it, so this was like a lot of stuff I was doing on my own. So this could be from like scripting to sort of looking at materials that react to magnetism, like how they can touch the electrical world, or how they fold, what you could begin to actuate, or even growing crystals. So this is like these two sticks are, a crystal becomes the joint that holds the two sticks together. And I was really interested in like sort of emergent systems and things like that. And the more I got into it, the more I started to realize like one of the big challenges in that, and I saw people here talk a lot about like when you have actuation, how do you amplify it? So, these are some projects I was doing around shape memory alloy. So one of the big problems is it moves so small. So I was trying to pull it on something that would flex down here, and then looking at one of these was a moire pattern. So there were two layers, and as they moved across, a tiny movement would be exaggerated by the moire effect, or leveraging cocktail umbrellas, because there's like a really cheap pre-made joint that has a lever, so I don't have to build 1,000 levers. So that was supposed to be like a screen of cocktail umbrellas. And then kind of like teaching this kind of work to other students and thinking about this a lot. And I think that one of the big problems when you think about actuation or sensing at architectural scales is scale. I mean, scale is like a real thing, obviously, but scale is different in the real world. And so I was really happy with this project down here that a student did, which is it was actually using a single motor and then gearing ratios. Those are just polarized lenses, and then you could just program how many turns you want to make and control like a whole huge area with just a single motor. And that kind of fun stuff. I was enjoying all that. But I think none of it really captured what I was trying to say about materiality. But I think this project got closest. This project was called Supercilious Skin. It was a project I did at the MIT Media Lab with Hiroshi Ishii's group. And the idea here was, what if a material could be the interface? What if it could be both a place for input and output? And I was really interested in how, back to scale again, how something bending in the wind, like watching wind move grass, and thinking about that at these radically different scales, from the scale of cilia moving as where that same mechanism allows them to move to like a palm tree bending. So we built this surface of these little kind of Q-tip almost kind of pieces so that it could surface anything, and it was on a taut fabric. And then it had this actuated array of electromagnets below it. And what's unique about it is because they're electromagnets, you could use them both to shake the little surface, or you could use it to sense the surface, because it was like the way a guitar pickup works. And I was like, oh, this is it. This is what I want to do. Great. Started to gain traction. This all makes sense. But this is like the end of your graduate career. And then you're like, okay, so I'm a guy who studied architecture and I'm making some kind of like surface that you could put on your table that I'm telling people they could build their whole building out of. And I had no idea. I was like, is this like a job? Is this something someone would pay me for? It didn't make any sense to me. And so that wasn't my job, actually. What I ended up doing was, this kind of forced me down a scale, I think, or back to the scale of the object, which is a really different way to think about interactivity. And I think I really spent a lot of time thinking about interaction at the scale of objects when I was working at the lab at the Rockwell Group. And so the lab at the Rockwell Group, it was a great place that I did for a number of years with this guy on the left who also looks like me. Josh Walton, he's my core collaborator. We still work together to this day. Actually, and I do want to say something about collaboration. It's like super cool. I don't know. I know when I was, I don't know, it can be really great to have a great working relationship with someone and just kind of like embrace that. And so it also really helped because when you're trying to cross boundaries, when you're thinking about the physical and the digital, I was somebody coming out of the physical world and I was working on physical computing and electronics and circuits and actuation, and he was coming out of the web world and trying to push into the physical. So that allowed us to build this partnership where we took turns and would just kind of like push. We used to, like, basically you'd cheat. You would say, oh, maybe you could solve this problem in software. You'd be like, maybe you could solve this problem in hardware. And we still have the problems at the end of the day. So we did a lot of fun stuff, this kind of work, kind of interactive events, content refreshes of trying to make like unique situated content, interactive stuff. I'll go through some of it. I think the core idea here was thinking about choreographing environments and really using this rubric here. We kind of thought about, well, objects. I'm trying to be talking about objects, but objects, environments, people, and stories. And in any project, we kind of thought, you know, the space you're in is this culmination of those four things. And you could choose any of them as the site of where your like design is. Any of them could be the part where you really intervene and make a difference about the thing that you're making. And you need to be conscious about that when you're designing. So some examples. I know that sounds kind of abstract. A lot of this began with sort of prototyping that moment between the physical and digital. So this was a project we did called Luminodes. Sorry, name went out of my head. This was early thinking about connected lighting. So there was a series of lights, and when you pick one up, it would affect the other lights. Each one had a Zigbee. This was like, you could see my homemade boards. They're terrifying looking, and it barely worked. But it was like really helpful to think about this thing. Once it's connected, they kind of act like a family. Each one reacts differently, and you could do, I don't know which way I'm pointing, you could do stuff where you would pick it up and connect it to the whole building, and it would light up this architectural scale lighting, and you could off-put that to leverage stuff someone else was doing. Or you could get really granular and make the specific object that you want to interact with. And I think that was one of the best parts about this project. This project was really began to think, and this is back to the object thing, it's a series of objects. Each one becomes this moment of interaction, but then they're all connected. And what was great was it was really magical, that moment when you picked it up and then this other thing responded. And you just began to think about the relationship between the two. And since one would respond and get out of sync, and two people would have to work together to shape them. And I think that goes back to that thing. You began to realize that a lot of what you're designing, and a lot of the area where we were trying to do the design, the experience, was using this object to create that social narrative, using the object to create that relationship between the people. So that was really fun, and it really kind of got me thinking more about objects. How do we take these objects to a larger scale? How do we get more people involved? So we had this opportunity to think about what if cities could use data to bring public space to life. We were invited by City of San Jose for their art biennale to do a installation at their city hall. And City Hall there, it's a Richard Meyer building. It's huge. San Jose is, I don't know if anybody's ever been there, but it's like a sprawling suburb at the bottom of Silicon Valley. And they have this huge building, and you look at the floor plan, and you're like, oh my god, this place is beautiful. And like, this is not going there. You look at the plan when they send it to you, and you're like, oh my god, it looks like, what is it? Siena. It looks like this public space. It must be amazing. And then you go there, and you're like next to a huge street, and there's like a parking garage, and like nobody wants to be there. So we were like, how could we bring all of this life that's happening in Silicon Valley, all of this discussions, all this activity, and make it reflected on this building, but also reward the people who went down there, who also became part of this conversation. So you can see here a diagram. I gotta see my own slide. It was a, I would say, 30-story building that we were doing the projection on. That's the blue output technology. And then we did a series of local input technologies that could record people using it, and then remote input technologies that were connected over the web. So here's a quick video. And the idea was that each of those little interaction stations on the plaza had a giant pseudo Ethernet cable. So you would jump or interact or yell, and that would connect right to the base of it, and then that would create that visualization. And it would have this kind of explosiveness. We were really interested in spectacle and something to watch, and then it would accumulate at the top, so it had some kind of history. And it was really amazing. So yeah, with like, you know, have things like capacitive sensing when you're sitting on the bench, a birdhouse, or not bird, a bird feeder, so that when wild animals were there in the plaza, they were still part of the city, or recording the traffic going by, trying to bring life to this lifeless plaza. But what was also really amazing was this, when there was nobody down there, when it was just this, became this lighthouse, not lighthouse, I guess lighthouse or clock tower, that something was reflecting, and you felt like you needed to go there. You wanted to go see what that was, and then that became this like, you know, positive flywheel, that people would go there, that would create more interaction, and people would feel like there was a reason to be down in the plaza. And again, back to the objectness of this, is this really these moments of interaction, thinking about the whole city as these moments of objects. I think the way we figured this out, I want to show this video, was really strong believer in experience prototyping. Really a strong believer in making a thing in order to understand what it's going to be like. And this, I don't know, I just still love this video. This is an early test of the whole system. And I think working with systems, I mean, honestly, that's something that I love so much. Once you start to get all the pieces, and even if they're at the wrong scale, or you can just squint at them in some way, you start to get a sense of what it's going to feel like. And so here, you know, there's so many weird parts about this video, but it's like really great, because it's like, that is going to be a beautiful visualization, but right now it's lines. And that's going to be a microphone, but right now it's a paper cup with a light in it. And those milk, what's the other? There's like milk crates that are going to be a bench, but right now there are milk crates in our office. And all of the Ethernet cable is going to be wireless. And it's like really interesting, you know, one thing I really want to share with people, actually coming out of architecture, and you're telling the story about how your career changes, or what you take from where you've learned already. One of the things that I really learned from architecture, really appreciated learning from architecture school, is how to kind of like set a vision of what you want to have, and then allowing other people to be experts. And sometimes in technology that's hard, because it's very kind of, there's sort of almost a machismo about understanding each part. But it's really, you know, how you collaborate with AV companies, or how you bring in experts to do one part of the project. Kind of odd I'm telling this story now, because we should have brought in an expert for our wireless part, but we didn't. It ended up with myself and my coworker in the city of San Jose. We had no way to figure out how good the wireless connection would be. So we end up just flying there, and we have our prototype units with the antennas, because it's a very complex art to design how strong your antennas need to be. And so I'm just in the city hall, and my coworker is walking around with this thing that's like filled with wires and an antenna and a trigger, and he just keeps like walking around and be like, did it trigger now? And San Jose is a really different place than New York. They're not as aggressive. So these bicycle policemen just are like slowly circling him because he's like the most suspicious person in the plaza. I think that's one thing that's really, when you do physical computing, you have to be very willing to let any policeman go through your bag at any time. So, because they know it's not a bomb. They're really good about that. But other people are like, that looks like a bomb strapped to another bomb. Actually, a related note, I went this years ago. I remember once I was teaching at Stevens Institute, and I was living in the city, and I was running late for class, and I had 2 bags with me, and I was like, oh, I should pick up this thing for the students at Radio Shack. And I'm leaving Radio Shack, and I'm like, oh, I only have 1 bag. That's strange. I had 2 when I was leaving my office. I think I just left my bag on the subway, on the PATH train. And you're like, oh, well, typically you're like, oh, you leave a bag on the PATH train, you're never seeing it again. And so I come back to the PATH train, and I'm like, officer, I stopped some guy. I'm like, I left a bag on the subway. Is there like a thing you can pick up? Is there a lost information? The guy's already like, buddy, look, you're never going to see that bag again. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. This bag was like filled with wires. And he looks at me and he's like, oh, you left that bag? He's like, the bomb squad guy is right there. There's a guy with my bag. So, sometimes it works in your favor. So, anyway, this shows a bit of that. I think the other thing that was really fun about this project was you begin to work on so many different scales. You're designing the hardware, you're designing these platforms. You have to make sure that they get fabricated and that they can sit outside for a month in San Jose. And you're designing the electronics and the boards and the projections. And I don't know, I was happy with this project. Another project I wanted to share was at the Cosmopolitan Hotel and Casino. And I think what this does is you can start to see how we've been doing a lot of projects that really telling the story, really investigating how objects can choreograph a space. But one thing that's really different about the digital is you can start to build it as a platform for someone else. And you start to get hungry of like, what if I made something that someone else could do something with? And what if we could do that in this lobby? What if we could make this canvas? It's like a really, great kind of design. So we managed to convince the Cosmopolitan Hotel and Casino to do this project with, I think it was like 500 monitors. I don't know why they thought we could do this. But the point is, it was huge. A ton of monitors, there's cameras. We're like, we should make this as an open thing that we can put generative art on. We can record as people walk through the lobby. It's like as soon as you start making a platform, you start making too many things right away. That might have been too many things that we could do. But it was great to do some of them. So this gives you a sense of it. One thing is, there are all these monitors that are almost bezel-less. They're really tiny at the time. I think they're pretty easy to get something that bezel-less now. They're behind a half silver mirror, so you don't see the monitor when it's black. It just turns off and becomes a mirror. And I think there was a lot of anxiety from the company. They were like, are we going to buy monitors and then look at them the next day and be like, these are too old? And I was like, well, that's the bezel around the thing is what tells you it's old. It's like, otherwise you're just looking at content. And the content you can refresh. And that worked really well. And it was, what I also liked was collaborating with the Rockwell's interior group. They made this bathtub of experience. This was a place where you had just gotten to Las Vegas, you just got out of your car, and really wanted to feel like you went somewhere else. Like you're going to become a different person when you walk through here. So it had to completely envelop you. So here's some of the examples. We worked with the choreographer Jerry Mitchell on this. who made some videos so that people would dance from one side of the columns to the other. I think you can kind of, you can see some people walking by, they're rather tall. And they were, let me see where the other part is. And then a lot of it was generative. A lot of it was custom software that we wrote that would evolve and change. So these were like trees that would collect snow, and then when someone walked by, the tree would shake and snow would fall down. Or there were leaves, and the leaves, if someone was standing in front of them, would sweep into becoming a deer for a moment and then blow away. And I think, a lot of the pitch here, to the casino is like, now you have this canvas, now you begin to have ideas of day parting. You can have it change for day or night. You can have it change for an event. They do specific pieces for like New Year or Chinese New Year, or I guess any New Year. But you can also, it kind of gives people a reason to come back. It gives like another news cycle, another new thing. They can invite different artists to come in and do pieces on there. I was really happy with this, and I think a lot of the work really became about curating and getting that set up. So we did some pieces. We had Casey Rees, who's a digital artist, did a piece on these. We worked with the Art Production Fund to have a number of visual art and video art adapted for it, and then worked with Digital Kitchen, who made a huge number of pieces for it. And I don't know, it is really different to kind of give up control to make something as a platform, to kind of say, like, I have this vision for it, and then now let's see what someone else does with it. And that went really well. So, going from there. After doing that, we really began to think about how can all of the tools that we made to be able to do these things were so one-off. It was so much effort. You can imagine in any of these pieces, especially in that last piece, so much of that is really like a high-performance machine. To be able to get video to synchronize on 500 monitors you're like, really kind of becomes an engineering problem. I think what I was really interested in is how, as a designer, how can you get designers to begin to prototype interactive spaces? Like, what could you do to make it easier to get people to start to think the way you're thinking? So, I was really passionate about well, here, I'll go to the next slide. We're really inspired by, I don't know if people know the Homebrew Computer Club. It was the club that in Silicon Valley where the Apple computer came from. It was a bunch of people got together and they would share computers. It was when after they launched the Altair, people were like, let's get together, build computers, and talk about them. And if you look at that, it was this amazing time. And we were like, what would be something like that for the Internet of Things? So we really wanted to make a toolkit for prototyping interactive spaces. Not for producing them, not for engineering them, but something so that you could just make them very quickly. Could it be built to be used in workshops? Could you bring it somewhere and in the course of a workshop, of a day or a couple hours, people could make something? Or more importantly, they could bring things they made or make their own things and connect those things together. It's really about, and this is back to the part about objects and materials. Objects are really about how they go together. The art of assemblage. When you put things together, in graphic design, you have ideas of layout. In architecture and interiors, it's like things exist already and you put them together and that tells a story. Or in fashion, you put together an outfit. You don't often are like making something from the material from scratch. And so there's an art of improvisation and finding new experiences from that. And could we make Internet of Things objects have that same lightness of how people use them? So it's really important that it enabled dynamic rerouting of inputs and outputs. I think we were fascinated by this idea of like a switchboard, that you could take an input of one thing and send it to the output of another. And I think this is, that was like the crux of what we wanted to focus on, and not really make it powerful, but make it simple. Make it easy to connect. And really focus on what things said, not how they talk to each other. And if people have ever done, for years, maybe this is less true now, But for years, when you would make a connected device, when you made something that connected to the internet, you would build it and you would solder it and you would get your board and you would connect it to the internet and you would be like, I did it. And then you were just like, I don't want to work on this anymore. Because you were so tired. You were like, oh my God, all I did was like get it to connect once. And then you never did anything with it. And so what if we made that part easier? And you could focus more on why two things are connected. So this was an open source project. That it did evolve out of another project. The project I showed at the Columns, we built maybe it was open source, maybe it was closed. We built a toolkit for that, and we kind of wanted to build the inverse of that toolkit. And so spacebrew.cc, it's still an active open source project. People still use it. And yeah, I'll show a little video about what this is like. And what you can see here is it's really about this workshop moment where people are building these physical computing projects or taking displays or taking inputs that they already have. And then you have this is the switchboard I was telling you about. So things are strongly typed and simply typed. So you have booleans, you have strings, and you have range values. And so initially there's like a lot of, what's really interesting is by limiting that, by only having those things, you know that anything that is a range can connect to another range. And it's a normalized range from, I don't know what we did, like 8-bit. And similarly with the string, it becomes very powerful. Oh yeah. And so what happens in that part of the video is you could see one person connecting to another thing and kind of going back and forth and back and forth. And I think that really told that story about, you know, this series of objects and really building these things that are connected. I think that's really like something I'm passionate still about, is about how these things begin to be connected. And people should check this out, spacebrew.cc. They still have we have jams sometimes where people make stuff. It's open, you can contribute. There's some message boards. It breaks sometimes, and luckily other people picked it up more to help fix it. You know, people connect with JavaScript, with Arduino, with processing, with open frameworks, with Unity. The idea is that basically there's like trying to build a library for all the different things, and then this just becomes, and it is really just like a wrapper, a simplified version on top of Node. It's nothing very complicated, but what's great is once you decide that this thing speaks it, and then you go to that, you know, the web server that has this switchboard, it's really fun. And you can go there and connect just two web things and control two sliders, and you're like, oh, I think I want to do this. Or maybe that's me. So then, a few years ago, myself and Josh left the lab to go work at Microsoft and really deal with the idea of interface, really deal with, even more so than I thought, really human-computer interface and how you connect to computers. So this work has been, turned out, when we started the project or we joined the team, we actually didn't even know what we were joining. It was at this phase at that time where there were so many NDAs that were like, hey, we did some, do you want to work with us or not? And we're like, sure, that's a great pitch. It wasn't quite like that, but it was an amazing team. I was really excited to work on it and really see what was unique about working at a place like Microsoft that has so much scale and so much history and so much resources behind it. And what's great about HoloLens is that it is kind of creates this new medium. And the term we use at the Microsoft is, actually this isn't just us at Microsoft, but we're really thinking about mixed reality. And mixed reality is this term that describes this range from the virtual to the real and the augmented. And it's actually, for me personally, it's like a really great concept when you start thinking about what is this mixed reality. Like maybe it's all of these different things could be said as mixed reality. All of these different things are layered upon our reality, but this one brings unique opportunities about what it understands. So I'll talk a little bit about that. What I wanted to show is just kind of like an overview of what HoloLens's capabilities are, and what, I was involved a lot in the UX, talk a little bit about the UX of it, and then talk about the opportunities, talk about what it can do. So, but I want to play this video first from the two founders of the HoloLens project, so just a second.
My name is Kudo. My name is Alex Kidman. Alex and I have a belief that you can build technology that allows people to interact with their digital world in the exact same way that they interact with the real world. The development edition of Microsoft Hololens is ready. Let's see what's in the box. There's, of course, Microsoft Hololens, the world's first fully untethered holographic computer running Windows 10, which comes with things you'll need, like a charger, carrying case, and a clicker. It offers another way to do things like select and scroll. Visit the App Store to discover the first wave of HoloLens experiences. Apps, games, and tools for creativity, productivity, and communication. These are our gift to you, the developers. We've done a ton of work from the OS up. The best, most amazing thing is yet to come. Welcome to the team. Let's together transform the world with holograms.
So yeah, so it is out now as a dev kit, and it's early days. We're trying to get developers involved, but I wanted to talk today a little bit about, so people can kind of wrap their heads around what it is, and talk about the hardware, talk about the input, and then talk about the kinds of experiences rather than the specifics of the experiences that you can have with it. So the hardware, and all of this stuff you can dive in a lot more detail if you want on the Microsoft site, so just putting that out there. But it uses spatial mapping cameras to understand the space that it's in, understand where it is, and keep track of its location in physical space. See-through displays, so the things that you see are both with the real world and the virtual. Custom HPU, which is the chips that we made to deal with all of that processing. There's so much sensing on this device that we built a custom chip similar to a graphics processor unit. It was the holographic processing unit. Takes all of that input and deals with it outside of the core processor. And then the spatial sound speakers. So the hardware, going back through this again, I think we saw that. But I think, what's important is that it really, what does that mean? That sounds like a lot of details about what this thing is, but what is it really trying to build? We call them holograms because they're these objects in the world that are made of light, and they really work to act like other objects. So they can occlude or be occluded, they can go behind something, they can go in front of something or block you from something. They can remain in the room when you put something there, it just stays there in that point as you walk around on this untethered device, or they can follow with you. Come back to the interaction part, but I think that this is really transformative to think about these virtual objects that are co-living in the room with you. They can respond to light in the room, cast shadows, they're a 3D environment, they can do all these kind of things. And then the 3D sound. It has open ear speakers, and you can, just the same as you are locating the source of the object, you can locate the source of the sound. So input is something that I'm really passionate about. You can see actually in a lot of my work, I was very interested in sensing. Something that I've been kind of helps frame it back to that partnership thing I said earlier. I think I kind of situated myself as like really thinking about sensing and how you record and understand the world, and working on an input UX. We kind of really wanted it to be this natural interaction, and we have this approach of gaze, gesture, and voice. So gaze is understanding where you are looking. It understands where your gaze vector is, where you're looking at the space, and it's really amazing. Actually, one of the craziest parts is just when two people can see it, when you're either in an experience like Skype or on a shared experience, and you're looking at something and you cast a ray, and someone says, I'm talking about that thing right there. And it's really quite different. Other than with like a laser pointer, it's not an experience you have all the time in the real world. It also kind of, and then this talks a lot about the cursor itself. One of the things in HoloLens is that you have this cursor based upon your gaze rate. It's out there taking action. It allows you to take action on things at a distance. It allows you, these are like remote collaboration scenarios, and you can see where someone else is looking. This is, we partner with NASA, and we made these amazing experiences for the NASA scientists to be able to collaborate on how the Mars rover works. And this is actually a great thing. And I think also being here at a place where people are spatial thinkers, you have to realize that you're not like most people. Most people can barely understand space. Most people can barely understand spatial thinking. And these scientists, they're experts in their fields, they're experts in rocks. But what's really wild is they would get these photos from Mars, and they're, it's basically just a field of rocks. And that's obviously enough. Don't work on that enough. The important part here is really that it just sped up their process to be able to talk and live in this dimensional thing, to make decisions. Because you're making a decision about where this rover is going to move next, what rock you're going to look at. Most people looking at this flattened 360 view, even though they're experts at this, they misunderstand, miscommunicate all the time. And actually, I think you could see some of the examples here in the sort of building industry. I mean, I think people have had experiences where you're like, oh, I guess I'm going to fly to this other part of the country just to go look at this site, just to tell somebody, no, I didn't mean here, I meant over here. And this allows those people to be in the same kind of experience at the same time. The second input is gesture. So the way the gesture system works, it uses simple gestures to select size items, drag and drop holograms within your world. The gesture system is basically that you have this air touch, air tap. You're able to register when we see your finger. We register that you've selected something. And it's a lot, in some ways, similar to a mouse. You have a pointer, you have this state of down, you have a state of release, and then you're able to kind of grab something and then move it. I hope I'm saying what's set up here. Yes. Yeah, tap, hold, zoom, rotate, all of these things. It becomes a rich language by the motions of your hand rather than the richness of your dexterity of your fingers. And I think what's also really important is that it's an untethered device. I think that's hard for people to, it's not hard to understand, but it's easy to forget that it's something that you just put on and walk around with, and you never have to set up your room. You don't have to be there ahead of time. It just starts working. And so we really have this vision of it that gesture, you never don't have the controller for it. That's really like, you always have all the stuff you need to be able to use the device. So beyond gesture, we have the idea of voice. And what does it say here? Use voice commands to navigate, select, open, command, and control your apps. Speak directly to Cortana, our voice assistant, who can help you complete tasks. The more she learns about you, the better she gets. And so you can imagine, you can have we have conversational agents like Cortana. You have conversations in apps that are really powerful. We're able to understand your voice really well. This thing's on your head. And we're able to understand and contextualize in these multimodal ways what you're looking at. So what are you talking about right now? You're looking at, we know where your gaze is. We can contextualize that to the voice commands that you give. And so it's really, really different than the way a lot of other voice interfaces are. And a really rich area. I think actually one of the things that's unique about doing this dev kit and working in this way is that we built this canvas of things and kind of thought about it from ourselves, what we think we can do with it, and then getting other people to really get involved. I think voice is something that is going to really surprise us as people build more stuff with it. So I'm really, really excited about that. And to kind of get people in the heads in 3D space. It is transformative when it's actually in the space, and I think anybody who's, a school of architecture or a school of design, where people are industrial design, or we make models, I think people understand how transformative that is to see something in 3D. Now for that 3D to have less physicality, but still the dimensionality of being able to walk around it is really amazing. So we have a 3D building kit that's built in, and we have partners like Volvo who are doing unique products with this. I think another whole area that's going to be really exciting is telling interactive stories using space, and using the space that you're in, the space that is your space. I think that's really different. In the image up here, that person is the guy with HoloLens, obviously human, and the woman is a hologram in an app, and she's sitting on your couch. And it really is a different experience to have this character sit on your couch and talk to you. Or this is the game Young Conquer, to have this Xbox squirrel jumping around and shooting stuff in your house. I think that, and honestly, that comes out of, this is from the viewpoint of gaming, from Xbox gaming, but imagine from the viewpoints of outside developers, imagine from people who are master craftsmen in storytelling, what kind of stories you could tell that take place over the real world. It's really important that it's additive to the real world. That's the mixed reality part of it. And that it understands reality. I think the couch is like a really surprising moment, that it gets enough information about the space to recognize something at that height and that space to be a couch or a seat. Create interfaces for objects and environments. So it's the registration, the understanding of space is so tight that it just world locks, it just stays right there, and it has permanence. And you can leave the room and come back and that thing stays there, which is really powerful if you think about, up here we have a guy working in a factory, and he can debug or understand something at his space, and that screen is right there. It's kind of like you can create this virtual interface to any physical place. Another example of that, which is less tied to a physical space, but more an object, is this robot. We made this demo of a robot that its whole interface is holographic, because the robot itself can't have a screen, can't have all of this complexity. So then you off-put that onto the HoloLens, and you can see here, not only can it do the mapping and tell you where that robot thinks it needs to go in the room, but you can change the temperature, see how far it's gone, or change colors of lights on it. I think if you are a spatial thinker, or you've made spaces, this is really, really different. I think that this is transformative. Make the invisible data of the world visible. And so this is sort of a conglomeration of those past few, but you could think about, we've been working with a partner, Case Western, where they're able to pull apart in 3D the complexities of the human body and see, how all these pieces go together, or understand what's happening with a speaker. You can imagine this as like a huge area to understand not just like an interface to an object, but imagine visualizing some performance of the building or something that's happening in that space or embedded in some kind of object. Another area that we would love to, how we frame thinking about making apps and interfaces for this, is extend and augment human sensing. So it senses the world, it has a way of seeing the world, and it's tied to your sensory system, but it can go beyond it. You can close your eyes and it can use this gaze ray and tell you what it thinks you're looking at if you were blind. That could be really amazing. Or you can see with superpowers. You can see, it could be back to the visible and visible. You can understand that thing there is the hot thing. I don't know what they're doing right there, but I imagine it's very important. These are idea starters, though. And then this idea of collaborate with perspective. The Skype experience. You can Skype on HoloLens, and you and the other person can draw in the physical space. This was a demo, my wife got a chance to do this demo as a test subject before the press came and saw it. And she came, and it was amazing, actually, two things. One, my wife was like, I'm so glad, she didn't know what I was working on. It was like 2 years of me working on this project. She still had no idea what I was doing because they were so obsessed with secrecy. And she said, oh, I was really glad you didn't tell me ahead of time. I'm like, why? And she goes, oh, because she's familiar with like some VR stuff. And she's like, I know if you told me, I would be convinced that I would get sick. I would have like known in my mind that I was going to get sick and probably made myself sick. But because I didn't know, I put it on. I never felt nauseous. It was so immersive and like still, just it acts like objects in the real world. And I was like, fantastic. That's what we're trying to do. But the other part that was really funny was I was like, well, what's this thing that you did that you were so excited about? And she was like, I fixed a light switch. I don't know. It's kind of like a weird thing that you're like this. But it's very empowering for people that what happens is you're wearing the device and they tell you how to unscrew and fix a light switch on the wall and explain which wire is loose. Which in theory you're like, I could just look at a book and figure this out. But having this person see what you're seeing and then they draw like an arrow in the world that's pointing, they're like, no, put that one in. And people are like, that's amazing. Or my wife was like, that's amazing. Or you can see we partnered with NASA. This is Scott Kelly. They made this project Sidekick so that they can work better between the astronauts in space. This is the HoloLens in space, but it allows them to communicate more specifically about what they're trying to get done. I don't know what these other people are doing there. Saying that the lamp is the wrong size or something. And there's a cat, grumpy cat. Anyway, if people are interested in HoloLens, I want to say, there's a longer version of the last little bit I did at this link. I can send these out, so don't write them down. About designing compelling mixed reality experiences. You can get on the community. You can learn to dev. You can get a HoloLens emulator, so you can start developing apps for it now, or you can order a dev kit. We'll say they are dev kits there, and we're really targeting developers and enterprise. It's not a consumer device yet, but it's really exciting that I know some places have started to get them and want to like understand what's new about them. So that's most of it. You can see here kind of this story that I tried to tell about thinking about materials, thinking about objects, and then thinking about interfaces. And then, I didn't go into a lot, but a lot of the interface stuff, one thing that was really unique about HoloLens that didn't come up in here a lot, but it runs all existing Windows, it runs all these other apps from the Windows Store. And so that was also really, really unique about thinking at a very interface level. How do you think about an interface that can go from a volumetric interface to a very flat interface? Yeah, and so at some point, so now getting involved in interface and able to get all the way to here, going what I thought was like backwards, end up going like forwards into this thing that's getting into consumers, and then hopefully kind of go the other way. That's like the dream, right? Is that next it'll become less interface-ish and more object-like, and we talk about how the holograms feel like actual objects in the world, and they'll become more interactive, and eventually it'll start to feel like this materiality, and it'll have this ability to transmutate, and it'll feel like the material of the world is something that we can adjust with and program and change with the same flexibility that we have with the digital, but with the same emotional resonance that we have with the physical. So, thanks.
Let's just have 2 questions, if there are any questions. Anybody want to ask?
Does that machine work with one eye?
Yes, it works with one eye. It is stereoscopic, but you can build, as you would know, 3D is, you could just move your head and it works just as well.
Can we expect in the near future that something like Windows Paint could be kind of transferred into like the 3 dimensions, like creating works of art?
Yeah, I think that's like a whole area that of expressive and and that will evolve. I think that's something that will happen. I think that's something that we'd love to see what developers do with that. I know we would love to do something with that. I don't know when you would see it exactly, but absolutely. I think that that's kind of what we want to say here also. These are some idea starters, but it is kind of this knowledge transfer. How do